Welcome one and all to the Stock Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for stocking up on the information you need to qualify for the Pro Tour. My name is Alex, and as always, I'm joined by a sick co-host, Jacob Negro. How's it going, Jacob?
I'm alright. I'm on the tail end of what was a way worse cold earlier this week. I'm feeling pretty good right now, but I just might have to blow my nose and mute and drink water, so I didn't want to have the camera on.
Yeah, so we're not having cameras on. Just didn't mean to say that you're always sick, by the way. As always, my sicko co-host, Jacob Negro. Sick at winning at Magic, maybe.
Maybe.
So, for today's episode, we have Avatar Top 10. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, me too.
Before we get kicked off, I want to remind everyone that you can find us over on patreon.com/stockuppodcast. We have one tier at the moment. It's $1 a month. For that, you get access to all of our exclusive content. You can also find us on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. This video is going to have, well, on the YouTube side, we're still going to have video, even though we don't have our webcams going, because we're just going to be showing the different cards for our top 10. And you know, before we get into the top 10 also, we did have a pretty big announcement this week with the ban and restricted list on Monday, so I just want to get your quick thoughts on that, Jacob, and then we can move on to Avatar.
Yeah, so I think they did fine with the bans. I think at a bare minimum, VV and Profs had to go. So I've been pretty surprised to see those either of those missing. I just think, you know, we talked about this before, but like VV, Cauldron, like which one do you ban?
Yeah, so real quick, the bans for standard were VV, Orniteer, Screaming Nemesis, and Profs. They did ban more than that in other formats. Not quite as relevant, but for instance, in Pioneer, which they haven't banned anything in a long time, they banned Heartfire Hero. In Legacy, they banned, interestingly, Entomb, and then also Nadu Winged Wisdom.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps not quite.
I have a friend who I know, Jonathan Rojo, who listens, who I actually hung out with earlier this week in Phoenix for a work trip. Well, I was on a work trip, but I met up with him and hung out. And I know he plays a lot of Legacy. And last time I watched him play Legacy, it seemed like those were two cards that were both very powerful in the format, was my understanding of it. Reanimator in Legacy has been a big conquest that, you know, I think for a long time it has been a strong deck in Legacy pretty much forever, because Entomb and Reanimate and Animate Dead are so old. And then, you know, like they print Atraxa and Archon of Cruelty, and it gets like better and better because the things they can reanimate are better. And then now it's like, it's kind of funny because I've realized this in Vintage Cube with Entomb too. Now they just play like, well, Psychic Frog got banned, but they play like Tameo and like kind of these blue-black fair cards. And I don't know exactly what they might play for extra discard outlets now that Frog's banned from a previous ban. But they kind of just slot in the Entomb Reanimate package just because. You know, they're kind of just like a blue-black mid-range deck with 10 kind of Reanimate cards as far as I understand it. But Reanimate's just kind of powerful with Force of Will and Daze. You know, you play a Tameo and your opponent Lightning Bolts it, and next turn you Reanimate it, and that's just a Tameo that costs one more life, you know? It's like Reanimate's a really broken card, so it's like... Yeah,
my understanding of this deck, first of all, is that it's been quite good for a while, and it's gone through several bans. They banned the Troll, they banned the Frog to try to get it under control, and it's still really popular. It's probably, I mean, it's hard to tell. Like, one thing I think is maybe it's because Tameo is a card that they're able to play this sort of fair game, but it's possible that they always could have done this with some sort of shell, and they've just sort of learned that they can do this, and it's obviously quite a potent combo.
Yeah, you know, the team
package
the Team Pro Tour almost a decade ago or whatever, kind of a breakout deck, which that format had Legacy, which is like the only Legacy Pro Tour ever, basically. CFB had like a Death Shadow deck, and they just played a couple Reanimates with their Street Wraiths, and the fact that, yeah, when you play discard spells and counter spells, you're also just going to put creatures in the graveyard, and Reanimate's just efficient. You know, Reanimates showed up in Outlaws of Thunder Junction among recent limited sets, too, on the bonus sheet, and it was a great pick there. You didn't have to do anything to set it up.
Yeah, and you could still probably play Reanimate in Legacy. I mean, it's just such an efficient card, but Entomb, you know...
Yeah, with Entomb and I think they're really saying, hey, you got to play like Faithless Looting. Like, you got to really
Looting. Yeah. It might make it so they have to go back to a more Reanimator deck, you know.
But also, yeah, you don't just... I mean, it's a huge deal because, you know, even the old style Reanimator, you know, I think they'd play like their lootings they had Entombs, of course, and they'd play like 4 of the like best threat, 4 Chancellor of the Annex, which is kind of a mix of a threat but also a disruptive piece and makes it hard to disrupt them, and then like 2 1-ofs to Entomb 4. And the days of 1-ofs to Entomb 4 is like no longer a thing. Now you're just gonna, if you want to play Reanimator, you just have to probably play 4 of either Atraxa or Archon or whatever, and maybe 4 of the other one. It's a ton of slots in your deck.
And then I'm assuming the Nadu ban is just really overpowered card and kind of miserable play patterns. So
yeah,
I assume
and
that's why
in Legacy, as far as I understand it, those decks weren't full comboing, but they were, they would full combo with other cards in their deck, like the one that can mill themselves sometimes, but also, they could play some of the creature cards, the Encores, that can combo with Nadu, that basically say for each creature you control, you can get 2 Nadu triggers, and then fill their hand up, play to the board, have Force of Will blue cards in their hand. They don't need to actually win in a format with Force of Will.
And then Pioneer, Heartfelt Hero. I know one of the very best decks in Pioneer is essentially mono red from Standard, but with upgrades like Mutavault and some other cards.
Yeah.
Are you surprised to see that go?
It's so weird because I feel like no one has had to care about Pioneer in like over a year.
Right. Does this make you think they might try to make Pioneer a spotlight format again in any sense, or are they just kind of throwing people a bone for whatever reason, the people that still play on Magic Online?
Yeah, I mean, they might move back to it. I mean, it's a format on Arena now, so I think they'd be pushing a little harder, because to be honest, like, when I played Explorer and it was kind of close to Modern, and now I'm playing Vintage Cube, and, it's like, it's kind of maybe not optimistic to say, but in a way it also is. If they got Modern and Vintage Cube kind of fully on Arena, I think Magic Online would be dead, which I think is maybe something they kind of want.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's certainly...
Obviously, there'll still be more formats you could play on Magic Online, but Vintage Cube and Modern, my understanding, are the bulk of what people play on Magic Online.
Yeah, and at this point, they just need Modern, pretty much.
Yeah, and to make the Vintage Cube just a little
and
better.
And then Standard, you and I talked briefly in our last sign-off about, our wish list for Standard. I think both of our lists were a lot longer than this. They went for a more concise list this time as compared to their last ban.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd been complaining about Profs for a while. That was the card that I was most surprised. Not that I thought Profs necessarily should have been banned 6 months ago or however long ago it was, but if you're going to ban 7 cards, I certainly thought Profs should have been banned back then.
Yeah.
But it hadn't put up recent performances, so it made sense why it wasn't. And then, yeah, Vivi... there's still Blue Red Prowess cards. I was playing decks on ladder in August that weren't Cauldron or whatever that would still be legal if Vivi wasn't banned right now, and they felt pretty powerful to me. Not as powerful as the Cauldron deck, obviously, but they still felt really strong. So that makes sense. In addition to that, Cauldron combos are actually pretty cool. So Cauldron's sticking around. I don't mind. I don't think... If the best deck in Standard somehow ends up being a Cauldron deck again, it's not going to look the same at all. It's probably going to be like a green self-mill deck. Like it's just going to be a totally different thing, is my expectation. So that seems fine to leave it on.
Yeah, and those decks are actually pretty interesting and likely easier to attack with Graveyard Hate.
Yeah, they're usually a bit more all-in than the VV Cauldron deck, where players were increasingly like cutting them after sideboard. Or I had friends that played some of these Spotlight series where they played even 3 3 Cauldron because there's so many mirrors, and that's like the mirror is so hard to pull that thing off specifically. So yeah,
this does leave us. It's funny. I'm a little sad to see Vivi go because I thought it was a cool card, and
I do. Yeah, I agree.
I'm not surprised it's getting banned though. It totally makes sense. Screaming Nemesis is a card that they probably didn't need to ban, but I'm pretty happy to see it go because I kind of hate that card personally.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess it makes sense on the side of gaining life. I've played a decent amount of Screaming Nemesis in preparation of Pro Tour Aether Drift, and never really felt like I was playing a lot of the matchups, I guess, where the can't gain life thing made up. In my mind, it was just like a must-play 4 of for Red Mirrors back then.
Right.
We joke it's True Name Nemesis, which is funny with the thing in the name, because like you can't block it, you can't attack into it, you can't use removal on it. Like that's literally...
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's also remarkably good against green decks, I would say.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Can't really block, can't really gain life. Those are the 2 main ways that green decks fight it. And green's been kind of hurting, although I think they're going to have some new cards in Avatar that are really good, and also there is that green combo-ish deck that was doing pretty well, all things considered, on the ladder. that with VV Band, I mean, that deck was a huge problem for it, I think. So I think standard, the broad picture, I'm going to expect mostly just every deck that was good before just gets a little bit better, and then maybe decks like the green decks, maybe decks like Yuna, they use its graveyard.
Yeah.
People don't have Cauldron in their deck all the time, don't have Screaming Nemesis. We might see an expanding of standard. I mean, it's possible, I didn't want us to talk about standard decks today because I think avatars can have a big impact, fortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, my saddest thing not here on the ban list is definitely Leyline of Resonance. I had mentioned that last week. I'm kind of, from reading the article, they mentioned that they think it can be handled, which I think is totally true. I imagine they probably have arena stats that might even say it has a sub 50% win rate. But it's just not that interesting to me. And I also think that like its existence and being able to win that fast kind of puts a weird pressure on the format that I wish wasn't there.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a disaster if that ends up being the best mono red deck after all these bans.
Yeah, and that deck
it's
doesn't
possible
have
it
Screaming
won't.
Nemesis typically. Maybe they've been sideboarding it because of the mirror thing I've been talking about, but typically they don't play it.
Yeah. Hopefully it just won't be the premier red deck, but we'll have to see. So yeah, we might as well segue over to Avatar now.
Yeah, exciting. I got super excited. Like I mentioned earlier, I was on a work trip Thursday, Friday of last week, so I was at the airport Saturday morning, and I was getting on this list then. So
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of good cards. I jotted down something like 23.
Yeah, my list was pretty long this time. I also did we can mention this with mechanics, but I did kind of a deep dive on two of the mechanics in the set.
Okay.
Because this set has lessons,
Yep.
which are a mechanic originally from Strixhaven, but there are no cards of learn. So in this set, and in standard currently, all lessons are just basically a card type that are referenced by other cards. As we can use this Wisdom one as an example, which is like an anticipate that says, so like one in the blue, instant lesson. Look at the top three cards of your library, put one in your hand, and rest on the bottom. But if you have three or more lessons in your graveyard, put all three in your hand instead. So there's cards like that kind of reward you. The three or more lessons in your graveyard is a common trend. And, I think I looked at it, and I think you could build a lesson deck in standard that is like better than standard decks from 5 or 10 years ago, to be honest, but aren't going to keep up with today.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah, like they look pretty powerful, but like by today's standards, they don't look pretty good. But like if you remember Guilds of Ravnica time, there was like an Is It Drake's deck, and the Lessons deck is almost like a port of the Is It Drake's deck, and maybe even more powerful than that deck was. Though Arclight Phoenix specifically is like a pretty unique angle that deck had, but still pretty similar.
Yeah, totally. I have thoughts about cards that way sometimes. Where like, man, if they just printed this 5 years ago, sometimes it's you don't have to go that far back, just 3 years ago.
Go ahead.
I thought our honorable mentions were funny because so you sent me your list because I had to make the graphics, and I noticed you put an ally in the honorable mentions, and I put lessons there as an excuse to talk about lessons, and I assume you put this as an excuse to talk about allies.
Yeah, and this card specifically, Earth King's Lieutenant, that was an honorable mention. Not in this case, it's not because I think it's like my top 11, but just because this card is a green and a white for a 1/1 creature, human soldier ally. It has trample. Whenever it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other ally you control. And whenever another ally you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. That is, with the addition of trample, effectively Thali's Lieutenant, but for allies. And if you didn't play back when Thali's Lieutenant was a card, that card made humans a deck in standard and a deck in modern. Modern's obviously way more powerful now, but it's basically like the best a creature lord can be because it scales at any point in the game. And also, when you play Thali's Lieutenant on turn 2, which you would in these decks all the time, it would grow very tall. So trample is like one of the best abilities it could have.
Totally, yeah. And I think it's likely this is going to be a multicolor deck too, so I think the fact that it's green-white isn't too much of a big deal. I think you'll probably be able to
they
fit
printed
that into
an
the
ally
deck
land in this set that taps for any color for an ally, and you can pay 5 and tap it to make an ally token. They printed Cavern of Souls is already in standard, and in Foundations there's a Secluded Courtyard, which is effectively Cavern of Souls, but without the part that says it's uncounterable. So, you could play 4 or 5 color allies, I'd guess. But I looked over, the only allies in Standard are from this set, with the exception of one basically unplayable draft common that wasn't even actually in the limited format of Foundations. It was on the bonus decks. It's it's like a 5-mana 5/4. It's terrible. But so once again, all you have to work with here is the cards in this set, and I think a big problem with them is that the 1-drops. There's a handful of them, but they're not that strong or necessarily playing towards this ally deck. One of them definitely is, but I think you need to fit like 12 or something, between 10 to 12 in this typical type of aggro deck. And then you could argue that maybe some of these allies kind of have more staying power and you could play more of a mid-rangey ally deck, but then I don't know, what are you doing with this Earth King's Lieutenant card if you're not just flooding the board? I think decks like these basically want to have all creatures or cards that put creatures into play. And also on top of that, they didn't seem that resilient to sweepers, which is just the first ask of a deck like this a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. I think if you go in a slower direction, you're going to get pretty destroyed by sweepers.
Yeah, exactly.
I also looked even far back as Pioneer. There's really no allies relevant to speak of. There's maybe one or two that could be playable, but
yeah, I mean, a decade ago I'd play, not that they were ever strong decks, but I have played against ally decks in Modern. But
I bet somebody will 5-0 a league.
Yeah, there's one that's Champion of the Parish but stuff like that. But yeah, that's what this deck really needs. But these cards are going to be in Standard for a few years, so Strixhaven is a set in the future, which I'm sure will at least have lessons. Learn is the mechanic originally in Strixhaven that let you grab lessons from your sideboard, which these cards could have applications in Pioneer and Modern, potentially with that. But it's kind of a little too much, too clunky for Modern. Pioneer, I think, is definitely much more within reason, but Pioneer is just not a format I've looked at in so long that it's hard for me to say. Because these lessons are really powerful. A lot of these lessons are better than any other Magic card like it that wasn't a lesson previously.
Yeah, before when they made lessons in Strixhaven, they were essentially overcosted by something like 2 mana each. So you really would never put them in your main deck. The reason I put my lessons as honorable mentions, I just put 2 that would almost certainly be in the sideboard of a learn deck. There are tools to make a lesson deck now when I was looking over the spoiler. But the more I looked at the cards, I just don't think they're really going to cut it as a deck for Standard. The caveat being, if Strixhaven has learn cards and actually just a few good learn cards, I think that might be able to push it over into a real deck.
Oh, definitely. I also think, Strixhaven, if they decide they don't want to redo learn, I'm sure they're still going to do more lessons. So they could fill out this lesson deck just by printing more lessons than intend on people playing them in their main deck.
Yeah. Presumably those lessons are going to be worse if there's learn in, just because of the limited format. But maybe they have some rare lessons or something. Yeah,
I guess I'm not certain if learn, I don't want to presume that learn will necessarily be in Strixhaven as much as I want to presume that there will definitely be lessons at this point. But they did have to ban Divide by Zero in Modern or in Standard, which wasn't pretty, and they were kind of, the learn lesson thing was still one of the better things you could be doing in that limited format, despite them being overcosted too. So
I just don't see why you would announce lesson or have lessons in a set where you've already announced Strixhaven coming up in a few sets. It just seems like 90% or more that Strixhaven will have learn again, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. But yeah, too, that one on your honorable mention list, Ero's Demonstration, that was a card somewhere that I wrote down at some point because even regardless of it being a lesson, I think that's just a card that's likely to see some play in sideboards or maybe even main decks.
Oh yeah, totally. It's one of the few that might actually see play regardless of anything.
Yeah,
just as a spell.
I have some lessons on my top 10. So
nice. Okay, so let's go on to your top 10. We'll start with you since you showed me your list already.
Okay.
Keep mine a mystery for a little bit.
Oh, nice. You have this.
What is your top 10?
So my number 10 is Shared Roots, which is a lesson, and it's 1 in a green for a sorcery lesson, and it says, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this is Rampant Growth.
Back, baby.
Yeah, it's a card they've kind of refused to put in Standard for a long time. I don't think that's super broken or anything, but, there's been some ramp decks. There's been some decks that play Glimpse the Core from LCI, which basically they only play to play like this, but it can only get a basic forest. And yeah, I just think, some of those Smuggler's Surprise is a card that comes to mind. That style of deck, I think, is just going to want this effect. I don't think this is like a thing that's going to push ramp decks super high, but I think they've kind of just been on the sidelines for a while, and they're going to play this. And in Modern Magic, I could imagine they're not going to start with 4 of these either, but I think they might start with a couple.
Yeah, so I also put this on my list. Whenever there's a redundant card on our list, we're just going to talk about it at the same time. So I'll say, for instance, that this Shared Roots I put as number 9. So similarly, I don't think it's broken or anything. I think for a long time they thought Rampant Growth might be too good for Standard, but Green has been missing a card like this. They have good mana creatures, but they haven't had a good ramp spell that gets a land for a while, and so I think there's a really good chance we see this in some numbers. I think Magic is moving past ramp a little bit. I think as formats get more powerful and the converted mana cost of cards gets lower on average, ramp gets worse, certainly. And we have some good 2-for-1 ramp spells at 3 mana, so it's not a guarantee that this will see play, but I think there's a good chance. And then bonus for it being a lesson, right? I mean, maybe someone will find something to do with that. Yeah,
and also, you mentioned mana dorks, and that's true. That we have Llanowar Elves, which is one of the best things ever. That like best mana accelerants ever, and I think typically these types of decks that will use Rampant Growth style effects, they might have sweepers of their own, or they just might not really offer anything up that's vulnerable to small creature removal, so they don't really want to start doing that with Llanowar Elves.
Decks like Yuna I've built in the past would probably want a card like this, certainly over a mana creature. I didn't play mana creatures in those decks.
Cool. That's your number 10.
So we can move on to my number 10. I've got Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop. So this is a land, taps to add a colorless. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast an ally spell or activate an ability of an ally source. And it also has 5 tap, create a 1/1 ally creature token. So I chose this card as my number 10 sort of as a stand-in for the allies deck. I figure this is really going to be a really key part of it. Lots of the good allies, since the only allies you're getting pretty much are from this set, you're going to have to use a lot of the rare ones across different colors. And between, like you said, this and Cavernous Souls and the other, uncommon Cavernous Souls, you'll be able to get a lot of colors. And, 5 and tap to make a 1/1 is not a very good rate, even on a land, but it is making an ally, and it is on a land. So I think that synergy makes this card one of the very key cards for that deck. And I'm just, I thought about putting the Dahlia's Lieutenant type card on it too. But.
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at it too, I mean, Fountain Port is a really tough card to compete with that makes tokens at a much better rate and pays you off for them. But this card could be included in maybe a deck that just has a high density of allies but isn't necessarily an ally deck, because it could just kind of, still kind of count as a colored source and be kind of a flood mitigation card anyways. Or actively fix their mana if they're 3 or more colors.
Yeah, it is a really strong card. I mean, hey, if you're making these, your opponent's making fish, they're going to run out of life points eventually, right?
Yeah, and the mana in Standard is about to be really good. Just jumping ahead, but Lorwyn is going to have the rest of the Shocklands. That's been confirmed. Mm-hmm. So, the idea of playing maybe a 4 or 5 color creature deck that isn't necessarily playing ally payoffs but uses this land to fix their mana, that could be within reason.
Yeah, just for a couple ally cards.
Or, maybe most of their creatures are allies, but they don't feel like they want to play an ally lord because they're also playing, a bunch of non-creature spells or something.
But you might still play land. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is my number 10.
Nice.
What is your number 9?
It's Bossing Say.
Okay.
So there's a cycle of these lands, and that they enter tapped unless you control a basic land. This is the green one, so it taps to add green. And then you can pay 2 and a green and tap it to Earthbend 2, activate only as a sorcery. So Earthbend, we'll read it now, is target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. That's whatever the Earthbend number is going to be. When it dies or is exiled, return it to the battlefield tapped. So, like I said, there's a cycle of these that basically they're monocolored lands that enter on tap to have a basic, and they each have a different effect. I'm not using this to represent all of them. I think specifically this one is pretty unique and powerful. It's kind of slow, but I think there might be decks that this can kind of squeeze into that, it's not that costly if your deck already has basics, which a 2-color deck might have like 8 to 10, things like that. But there's some interesting synergies in Standard with it so first of all, by itself, you tap this and 3 other lands, so that's 4 mana. And you can start putting counters on a land, and it's not like that land is vulnerable because the Earthbend mechanic says if it dies or is exiled, it comes back. So your opponent can't really like 2-for-1 you. So it's kind of like making a 2/2 token or like amassing an army, but you can continue to do that on the same land if you'd like, or split it up. You have that option. More importantly, maybe, is that there are creature lands in Standard, the cycle of Restless Ones and Soulstone Sanctuary. And the Restless lands are actually worded in a way that say when they attack, regardless if you've activated their activated ability or not, you get their trigger. And not that that's super broken, but it is like a kind of a cute combo. Like you could stack up a Restless Cottage, and then when you activate those lands, any of them, they'll no longer be 0/0s. They'll be whatever the power and toughness it says on the card is, but they'll still keep all these +1/+1 counters. And if your opponent kills them, they're just going to come back. So in my mind, this might be something you play 1 or 2 copies of on top of like 4 Restless Cottages and a Golgari deck, and maybe even a Soulstone Sanctuary, and it can just like be kind of a nightmare for a slower deck to maybe overcome.
That's all pretty interesting. I read through these lands pretty quickly. I liked the white one the best. I think the blue one loots. The red one gives firebending to a creature, and then the black one...
The black one makes a 1/1 that can't be blocked and can only block spirits, I think.
Right, but it's kind of expensive. It's like 5 and tap. So, yeah, I thought the white one's the best. I thought the others were a little weaker. I didn't consider as many things with this one. That is in particular, when you can put this onto one of the Restless lands, I mean, that actually sounds pretty strong.
Yeah, there's something else kind of cute you can do with Earthbending that I think won't really come up in any normal constructed format because the cards that are I don't think Earthbend is powerful enough for Modern, really, to do anything cool with, but if you Earthbend lands that have sacrifice abilities, you can sack them and they come back. They do come back tapped, so there's not really going to be any loops. But I guess, for example, in Vintage Cube, you could Earthbend on your Strip Mine and then Strip Mine your opponent every turn.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I guess you could do that to your Fielder in the Standard, although that's...
That everything doesn't actually sound appropriate for that to actually come up besides maybe literally that example I just gave, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to point out these lands... They do say a basic land, not even a basic land of their color, like the old castle template.
Yeah.
So they're pretty strong. I think they're likely to see play, even to some of the weaker ones.
A lot of the 2-color decks in Standard right now seem like they have about 8 basic lands, but I guess these might be cutting into those, maybe not. But, I think they'll enter untapped like a decent amount. And then if you're a 1-color deck, it's way more likely, which... the white one is on my list. I do think it's better than this, and that's going to come up.
Cool, yeah. So let's see. We can go on to my number 9.
Well, yep, Shared Roots, right?
Shared Roots, yeah. So I guess we're on to your number 8 then.
Okay, so this is a weird one. It's kind of hard for me to tell how it's going to be. So it's Airbender Ascension, which is 1 and a white for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, airbend up to 1 target creature. This doesn't have the rules text of airbend on it, but airbend is... Exile that, whatever you're targeting, some things airband, things besides creatures. And that player may cast it for 2 generic mana. I don't even believe it's on a later turn. So, there's still the same timing restriction. So if you exiled something that can only be cast at sorcery speed, then at sorcery speed they can pay 2 to cast it again. It says, whenever a creature you control enters, put a quest counter on this enchantment. And at the beginning of your end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, exile up to 1 target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So there's a cycle of these quest cards, or maybe there's only, I don't know if there's a black one, maybe there's just for the 4 bendings. But anyways, none of them seem close to as powerful as this one, and I think the ETB of airband up to 1 target creature is kind of interesting because, like, if you can build your deck in a way that maybe has a lot of ETBs itself, then I think kind of naturally this is actually a pretty powerful reward and it's not that hard to achieve, like you just play creatures. But when you play this card, you're not forced into, like, airbending your own creature and replaying it. Like, you can airbend your opponent's token or just their 2-drop and make them recast it. Like, it is kind of like a mana war in that sense to me, but it's really flexible.
I love this card.
Yeah,
I had it pretty high on my list. I talked myself down, but I still have it on number 7.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, one of the things I like about it is just what you said. It's sort of just a mana war, especially if you're just like bouncing their 2-drop,
or bounce a land or else that costs more.
Yeah. They're 1-drop, they're 2-drop. It's worse bouncing bigger things, but you're only spending 2 mana on this.
Yeah, you're trading 2 mana for their 2 mana ultimately, right?
Totally. And it's not quite draw a card. So
Yeah.
I'll give it that. But we've had a history of 2-mana enchantment engine cards just being really broken already. So I don't
Yeah.
see why this one wouldn't be really good also. You have to do a little bit of work to get enough creatures into play, but a lot of the creatures you'd want to play with this are creatures that come into play and create tokens, and maybe even more token creatures, that sort of thing. So it shouldn't be too hard to turn on.
It's not limit to once per turn either on getting the counters, Not that Overlord of the Mistmores is perfect with this, but I could see a deck containing that card, and when you impend it, you're going to get 2 counters on this.
Yeah, totally. And just every turn, you get something. So if your deck is full of creatures to blank, I think this is going to add up to be a pretty strong card.
Beza sounds like a great card with this, for example.
Totally, yeah. So yeah, I've got that on my number 7.
Nice.
My number 8 is going to be Heartless Act.
Oh, nice.
So I don't know why they got to do this to my boy Appa. This part in the movie made me real sad, or not the movie, the TV series, whatever. But not the best black removal spell, right? I mean, there's a lot of cards even in standard right now that have counters. Funny enough, the VV deck being banned is pretty important for this, I would say.
I guess a deck that comes to mind that sees some play is the green-blue kind of stompy deck. And, that deck's got Jackal and Ouroboros and Innkeeper's Talent, and I was a little worried that the premier creature deck in the format might make this card completely unplayable.
Yeah, so that totally matters. I think what's going to make it good is that black is just really hurting for this card. A 2-mana Doomblade effect, and I think
it's going to
they'll
compete
take whatever
with,
they can get.
Shoot the Sheriff, right? So it's just it's another option in the black deck's arsenal. Definitely.
Right, and maybe they'll play a mix. Maybe this is better than just Shoot the Sheriff overall. Probably they'll go with a mix. But I think one of the reasons black is struggling at the moment is that it needs a card like this. And, we're about to go into a spot where blue-black mid-range might be really good again. And
did you read it?
The Heartless Act?
Yeah.
Destroy target with no...
I just meant like to the listeners.
Oh! Heartless Act. 1 and a black. Instant. Choose 1. Destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. Good call, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a reprint.
Ikoria, I think, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's, in my mind, why I skipped over it. And when it was in Ikoria, I think it was a somewhat playable card, and it was definitely a role player.
I've seen it in Modern every now and then, too. Or, sorry, not Modern, Pioneer.
Pioneer. Yeah, that makes sense.
Pioneer has the same issue where they have to pick the right Doomblade in those.
Yeah, so it's totally a thing where maybe depending on the weekend you don't even want it in your deck, but Doomblade is a rate that most decks want when they're black and in standard.
And then,
so
I guess historically too in Pioneer, sometimes the remove 3 counters from a creature is what makes it shine. Weirdly enough, specifically Archfiend of the Dross was the one that made people play this more in Pioneer because they were playing the Archfiend with the room, so this card just made your opponent lose the game on the demon.
Yeah. So not a particularly interesting pick, but I think it's a good shot of seeing play and being important. We'll go on to 7. So your 7 is unknown. Mine is the Airbender Ascension.
Cool. Yeah, my 7 is Gran, which I love that name. This is a single blue mana for a 1/2 legendary creature, human peasant ally. I don't think this is really an ally reward, but when Gran becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. And non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast as long as there are 3 or more lessons in your graveyard. So this one, I don't have an exact home for it. It's mostly just that it has a lot of potential to me.
In your mind, is this just for the... So this isn't just for the lessons deck in your mind, probably. This is just you like the first ability?
I think if this card sees play, you're going to use the whole thing, but maybe your deck doesn't have to be all lessons. There is Station and Lands of Station in Standard, so the becomes tapped looter is kind of interesting to me, and there hasn't really been like a looter that only costs 1, which I know you have to like set up. But if you play this on turn 1 and your opponent doesn't play something that can block it, you can attack with it too. It's not like you have to find a weird way to tap it, but there are some kind of easy ways to tap it. And then, also those station cards can give this haste in a sense too, which is nice. And then, I don't know, the payoff of like your non-creature spells costing a whole 1 less is really strong. And if you're building around a deck that is going to use this as a looter and kind of a payoff, not that I think it's as good as Jace Vryn's Prodigy, but the upside of legendary looters is that they kind of fix themselves. Rona does that too, Rafine. So it's a legend that I think doesn't necessarily have the same downside as many. I guess Relic of Legends has literally rotated, but that's an example of like The Slogurk deck, I think, would have played this card. So, like,
Okay. Yeah.
I just think that, like, there's some potential there when things kind of align that, like, this card just does so much for 1 mana, and it has a lot of things that can go right with it.
Yeah, I guess in my mind I was thinking this as like a lesson card, so I wasn't ready to put any of these lesson payoff cards on my list, but I will say, whenever they make a 1-mana creature and it's a 1/2, I feel like it's kind of destined for greatness.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. They like making good 1-mana 1/2s nowadays. So cool card. Yeah, my 7 is Airbender's Ascension. We can go on to number 6.
Cool. My number 6 is Wan Shi Tong Librarian, which is X blue for a legendary creature bird spirit. It's a 1/1 flash flying vigilance. When it enters, when it enters, put X +1/+1 counters on him, then draw half X cards rounded down. Whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. So for the X cost, this is like a 4-mana flash 3/3 flying vigilance, draw a card is what, like, kind of where it starts. But specifically in modern or maybe even older formats, the kind of combination of being this X spell flash flying kind of giant thing, but also a search punisher is pretty interesting to me. Like, you can just flash this in response to a fetch land in modern, and that's for 2 mana, and you have a 2/2 flying vigilance that is going to continue to pay you off if they search or don't kill it. But also, I think in standard, I don't know if there's a lot of searching. There might not be, but the kind of X spell aspect of it, combined if there is any searching, it just seems like a pretty strong card to me that's pretty pushed.
There's Demolition Field.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It's like a very small but probably relevant interaction. Okay, maybe this sounds crazy, but like I put this as number 1.
Okay, wow. Do you think it's going to... I mean, modern, it's really a big unknown, especially going into the RC. But, it's not like you lose when you crack a fetch and your opponent flashes this in either. It's not like crazy.
Yeah.
It is strong.
So I think this is totally a good card. And if you're more right than I am, it's because I'm maybe naive to the power level of Modern and Legacy these days, but this seems like a shoo-in for those formats to me, too.
Yeah, a little bit's about a home, I guess.
Okay.
But, there's a blue-green birthing ritual deck. That's one where people have been talking about this, that just tries to play the board with these kind of flying things anyways, and this is kind of a punisher, but also, as the game goes along and you get a lot of mana, that becomes pretty powerful. It doesn't gain life, but it's actually it's a very similar rate to Hydroid Krasis, but it's bigger and has vigilance instead of trample.
Yeah, for standard, that was one of my reference points. One of the themes when I was making my list, I will say, is I downgraded legendary creatures quite a bit. There's a lot of legendary creature in this set where it feels like you'd want to have a lot of copies of them in your deck, and that definitely makes it weaker that you can't.
Yep.
But in a format like Modern, I don't know, can't you just play 2 of these in the blue Blink deck, any of the blue...
Yeah, Modern also has a little bit of resiliency to blue Legends because of subtlety and force negation being pretty strong.
Yeah.
The deck I'm talking about, too, is also a Flare of Denial deck to add to that. So, like, you could flash this in and draw your card and sack it later.
Yeah, and then it's totally relevant, right? That when you get to a late game and you have 6 mana, that you just have this huge bomb in your deck now.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, too, when your opponent searches their library text, though, there's been times in Modern where people used to play Shadow of Doubt, which is, like, your opponent can't search, or players can't search libraries this turn, draw a card, 2-minute instant. And people, or Stifle in Legacy, too. And, like, people do learn to play around these cards.
Yeah, if it became a big thing...
Yeah. Or if it's
like your opponent has 2 blue up, maybe they don't crack their fetch in a turn, and then they still have to play this, and then you can kill it before you fetch.
Yeah, or you learn to fetch on turn 1 or things like that. You just fetch your land, and you fetch your Surveil land turn 1 on the play and say go, or stuff like that in open deck lists especially.
That's a good point. Although, so I'm also excited about this card in Standard.
Yeah, no, I agree. It seems like the last line of text might not come up in Standards, but it is very Hydroid Krasis-like, so...
And it's got Flash, and some of the blue control decks that have been pretty good have been missing a good win condition. They're forced to play kind of these crappy sorcery speed stuff. And having this nice big, vigilance flash flyer that draws cards and scales with how many lands you have in play, I mean, this card just seems lovely, and it's going to be The fact that it's going to be all over formats, I think, is what put me at number one for it.
That makes sense.
But we'll see, It's hard to evaluate this sort of thing. It is only drawing half-X cards. You can play around the library thing. We will see, but I'm pretty excited about this card. It seems quite strong.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go on to my number 6.
Cool.
And I have got Abandoned Air Temple.
Great. That is my number 5, so pretty close.
Perfect. So we're relatively aligned on it. Yeah, this is definitely the best of these lands, right? I mean, it's basically Gavany Township, but it taps for a white mana.
And doesn't require you to even play green mana.
And doesn't require green, yeah. And Gavany Township was a really strong card. I mean, saw a bit of play in Modern, too, back in the day. Just being able to pump your whole team for 5 mana and a turn, it's huge.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to see play in Modern, but
Probably
I think
not.
it has maybe an immediate home in Standard, which is kind of that mono-white tokensy deck that already has, Carrot Cake and Overlord of the Mistmoors and Elspeth.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to play like 10 basic planes and stuff like that. They also play like Sunken Citadel, so you can discount this. It just seems kind of perfect for that deck. They have this,
and then there's a lot of green-white shells that probably would be good if they had Temple Garden. So once that comes around, maybe this fits in there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
In a 2-color deck, this might come into play tapped some of the time, but I think it's strong enough to justify it. It's just hard to... I mean, the fact that it's any basic land and not just plains makes me like this quite a lot, I think.
Interesting. I would have thought... Well, I guess, obviously, if it said basic plains, it would be worse. But I think, actually, because of the shock lands and multiversal passage, that these lands would be better if they reference the land type specifically.
Oh, maybe. With the passage also. Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess we didn't go over our last top 10, which is fine. I don't really want to. But we didn't include multiversal passage, which was probably actually one of the better cards from Spider-Man. And it's pretty weird because that card is seeing a lot of play in 2-color decks, and it is worse than a shock land, but still kind of acceptable. To have, especially with Verges and really just the competition of other lands, it turns out it's just, people are just going to play 4 shock lands and 4 multiversal passage.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even maybe one more shock lands come out.
Yeah.
Okay, so your number 5 is this Air Temple.
Yep.
Right. So I will go on to my number 5, which is Spirit Water Revival. 1 blue sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may Waterbend 6. Waterbend is sort of a combination of Convoke and Improvise, so you can tap creatures or artifacts to pay for 1 generic mana.
Yeah, and it's kind of not clear from the rules text, but you can also pay mana.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Wow, it doesn't make that very clear. I just sort of assumed. Good thing I'm right. Otherwise, this card would not just be on there. Anyways.
Of course. All the Waterbend cards would be too bad for that to be the case, is kind of what clued me in, but yeah.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, so this card says draw 2 cards. If this spell's additional cost was paid, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw 7 cards, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And then you exile Spirit Water Revival. Interestingly, it's kind of like a wheel effect, but you don't have to shuffle your hand in. So if you cast this with the big Waterbend effect and you have 5 cards down, you just go up to 12 and you don't have to discard. So I put this on my list like right smack in the middle because I'm kind of a coward. I feel like if there's a card in this set that they missed and was really broken, it's this one. But also, I don't know, it is kind of just a divination with extra steps, so maybe maybe it's a
really
flop.
have to be doing the thing, because there's a lot of cards way better than divination now.
Right.
So
okay, here are my thoughts about this. So I think mostly if this card's going to be good, you're going to have to really be doing the thing.
Definitely, yeah.
Maybe you're a green deck that has like mana creatures and ramp and also cards that make multiple permanents, which are pretty abundant in green. Maybe you do it with white. But maybe even you play lots of crappy 1 or 0 mana artifacts that you wouldn't otherwise play just to get this.
I was about to say, Spyglass Siren
effect.
is like Waterbending's best friend.
Oh yeah, 1 mana, 2 things.
Yeah.
And it's artifact or creature, so there's a lot of ways to get to do this. And then I do think there's also a edge case where you could maybe play one of this in like a blue-white control deck, because the mirror matches and sometimes also against extremely grindy decks come down to just resources in your deck.
I see. Yeah.
And if at some point you were to tap a couple maps and a fish token plus 6 mana and do this,
That's fair.
That could swing something. That's obviously wouldn't deserve a number 5
it's
slot.
kind of relevant for Shuko that it exiles.
Yeah, that's true. But so you're not doing Elixir of Immortality with this. But, I think the chance that it could be broken, I just wanted to include it in case it is crazy. I don't want to miss Quantum Riddler again, is what I'm saying, okay?
Yeah, that's fair. Your example also, it is kind of interesting that if you have this in a blue-white mirror, you're not going to deck if they don't have it. So.
Oh, no. And almost every time the blue-white mirror comes down, you answer each other's planeswalkers, and then you're trying to kill each other with, Restless Anchorages,
Yeah.
And countering each other's Get Lost. So this would totally break that wide open just by having one, especially if other people don't realize it for the first couple of weeks or so.
That's true.
And Divination's bad, but it's not that bad.
It's more the competition.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't want 4 of these when you could have stock-ups, for example, but...
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so that's why I got it. We move on to number 4.
Yeah, so my number 4 is Boomerang Basics, which is a lesson.
Interesting.
It's a single blue sorcery lesson. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you control that permanent, draw a card. So it's a sorcery, so it's not really in the same space as competing with Into the Flood Maw. But I have registered in my wish boards multiple times the card Void Snare, which is this without the text of if you control that permanent, draw a card. It's just a sorcery speed 1 mana bounce something.
Okay.
And, that kind of got outclassed by Flood Maw for sure. But before that, it was kind of unique to bounce something for 1 mana. And I guess in my mind, the self-bounce thing specifically can come up with Storm Chaser's Talent. You could play Talent on 1 and this plus Talent on 2.
Oh, sure.
And you could, pick this up with Talent and bounce it. So that's kind of where I have it in mind. But also, if Learn is a thing, either it gets reprinted in Standard and there's more Learn cards, or if you're looking to learn for something in the older formats like Pioneer or maybe even Modern. I even was looking a little bit at Gnarled Professor in Amulet recently, which is a green 4 mana 5/4 trample that when it enters you learn. This is the best thing ever as a lesson, actual lesson mechanic. It's got to be just the best one to do.
Yeah, I definitely had this in my mind when I was thinking about a Learn deck. It's going to be really strong. It's interesting though. Lesson cards are almost so strong that makes me think maybe they won't make good Learn cards, but I don't know.
And then Storm Chaser Talent, Cryogen Relic, those are things that come to mind if Learn isn't the reason you're playing this, but I just still think it's kind of versatile and maybe we'll just find a home anyways.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I don't have this anywhere on my list, mostly because I kind of turned off the lesson part of my brain, if I'm being honest. But this one is quite strong. The bounce your own permanent thing, sure is good with Cryogen Relic, you're right.
Yeah, if you play it, that's what you want to do. And the Storm Chaser's Talent is the big one to me, because that's both kind of an aggressive start to a game, but also just it's not exactly the this town kind of thing you could do later, but it's still a value engine that will keep you from flooding out.
Yeah, and if you're a prowess aggro deck,
you're bouncing a thing.
And
they're playing into the Flood Maw, which is better at dealing with your opponent's stuff, of course. But not always either. That's not always the case. Trying to think of some examples, but if your opponent plays the Demon Room and you just want to bounce it, this doesn't have to give them a fish.
Yeah, that's true. It's certainly at bouncing creatures it's worse, but in online permanents not giving them a fish might matter. Sorcery, instant is typically a huge upgrade over sorcery, especially for that kind of effect and answering lot cards and that sort of thing. So it's definitely different than Into the Flood Maw, but that's okay. It can still be good. I like it. We'll go on to my number 4. So I have The Legend of Roku.
Oh, cool.
I'm noticing that I like the big flashy cards. So this is 2 red for a saga. The first chapter is exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Chapter 2 is add 1 mana of any color. Chapter 3 is part of a cycle where you flip this card. And I forgot to have it ready, so let me look it up really quick.
I read this one a decent amount of times.
Yeah, it just seems like a really strong red 4-drop. So I'll read the back. It turns into a 4/4 legendary creature with firebending 4. So that's when it attacks you, add 4 red mana. But the mana goes away at the end of combat, so you basically have to use it for activate abilities or instants.
Yeah, firebending lasts a little longer than mana normally does, but you still don't get to use it at your main phase.
Yeah, so you could use it like after damage is dealt.
Where you can let them block and then maybe cast an instant after they block, importantly, that matters. Stuff like that.
Right. So firebending 4, and then has an activate ability of 8. Create a 4/4 red dragon with flying and firebending 4. So pretty strong card on the back. Basically, this seems like the new premier red 4-drop for me. It's just a ton of value. The second ability is minor, but it's nice to help play all those extra cards. Like maybe if you hit a 6-drop off of this. I don't imagine a lot of decks are going to play this that have 6 drops, but if you hit a 6-drop off of it, you would be able to cast it.
Yeah. Is the backside legendary?
Yes.
Okay, good to know.
Yes. Yeah.
But the saga itself is not legendary, so that's nice.
No, yeah. And so you could ramp onto this in a green-red deck on turn 3. It might be really nice. In your red deck with a lot of burn, it could help find burn spells and then be a big creature. I just think it's a ton of value for 4 mana. We had the red and white saga that exiled the top 5. That was pretty good for a while.
Scald, still in cube.
Yeah, and that exiled a lot more cards, but it's 2 colors and you don't get this huge 4/4.
Showdown's only top 4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
3's quite a bit still.
Yeah, no, you're right. I kind of like this card more. I think when you play these types of cards, I wouldn't think about going up the curve, but the add 1 mana of any color is really nice on a turn where you're trying to cast a bunch of cheap cards. I think you should view this more of like a curve topper. You're not going to have some other 4s or 5s, but it's kind of reminding me a little bit of Fable of the Mirror. I don't think it's nearly as good because the difference between 3 and 4 is huge, but just like it's gonna be consistently like drawing you cards and be a threat later. The scariest thing about this, I guess, is that it's like 2 turns of not board impact.
Yeah, I did think about that. Like if you play at the top of your red deck, sometimes you just want that to finish the game, and this kind of it does a slow thing. I think maybe if you're playing with this as the top of your end of your red deck, you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of burn in your deck. So I think that'll be a common play pattern to dig for burn with this.
Yeah, I'm just more thinking like, you just play like your torch towers and your defensive tools, and maybe just red plus another color mid-range deck where you play all the best cards you can in standard, and maybe you don't need to be maybe that color doesn't need to be blue because your card advantage is here now instead of in stock up and Storm Chaser's Talent type stuff.
Yeah, totally. Also could be good there.
Like Rakdos or something, for example, with good removal.
It's really hard for this not to be a 3-for-1, and maybe even more.
Yeah,
so,
no, I agree.
I think it's surprisingly strong, maybe. Although maybe other people think it's strong. I haven't really talked to much people besides you about this set, to be honest. So we could go on to number 3.
Yeah. So my number 3 is Redirect Lightning, which is also a lesson, though I'm not really including it because it's a lesson at all, to be honest. It's a single red, instant lesson. As an additional cost to cast a spell, pay 5 life or pay 2. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So I'll admit these effects are a little narrow, but they also kind of just don't exist in Standard, Pioneer, or Modern. People have played stuff like Misdirection or Divert in Legacy, but I think I'm not expecting this to be some totally warping 4-of type card, but kind of in like the category of Spell Pierce of the world, where I think people are just going to play like 1 or 2 of these in the 75, and it's just such a strong gotcha that I kind of am wondering if in all 3 formats I just mentioned, if this is just going to be a card that you're going to have to get used to playing around in some spots, because you use a removal on their guy for 1 mana and 5 life, they could change it to their guy. The buyout of 2 mana makes this way stronger because you're not just stuck with something potentially uncastable the whole game. There's some major blowouts, Belcher is an example. There's just a lot of stuff that I think might not be main deckable, but when you do the thing with this, it's pretty powerful. Also, for those of you that don't know, this can counter a counterspell under most circumstances. What you do is you change the target of their counterspell to this, and then this is already resolved. So now their counterspell doesn't have a legal target and it fizzles. but that's, a trick you can do with these types of spells as well.
It's funny, I looked at this card a lot, and then I was like, man, 5 life's kind of a lot. I don't know, it's kind of narrow. And then decided not to put it on my list, and then you sent me your list, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I really think it's going to be like Spell Pierce is like the perfect example.
It's really unique.
Where it's like you're not going to just jam 4
like
of these in your
Dispel,
deck.
maybe.
It doesn't seem broken, but it's like both a thing that I think it's so powerful and has really high upside that people are going to play 1 or 2 copies a lot, and it's something that like it's not, getting your spell pierced or whatever is not as big of a blowout as getting your spell redirect lightninged when things align.
Yeah, like on a removal spell is pretty big deal. It
has
is red
potential to be
too, which is like,
yeah,
it's almost like having a dispel on your red sideboard.
Yeah, if you've played
pretty unique
base red decks in many formats, you'll notice your sideboard's usually kind of crappy. So,
Right.
yeah, I just kind of think this might be a multi-format thing that we're just all going to have to get used to thinking about.
I kind of think you're right, man. I kind of think I should have had it on my list, and especially it's also a lesson, so like that could be relevant too. Although
Yeah,
I guess
definitely.
that's one of the smaller things, but
Yeah, it's weirdly like
if they print a good learned card, hey,
Yeah.
okay, well, fair enough. We'll go on.
I guess
to
weirdly
my
enough, like mono red is not exactly where I'm thinking this is going to show up. It's more the decks that want to play long games, like a deck with counter. You play these 1-ofs because you play long games and you get access to them eventually. But
yeah, the fact that it could, like, even something as crazy as redirecting Belcher could come up, like maybe another combo deck surfaces where this also hits it, and so it becomes a popular sideboard card.
Yeah, people have played Untimely Malfunction in Modern sometimes, which is a split card of 1 in a red, Shatter, or that, kind of specifically for Belcher.
Yeah. I will say the 5 life, I mean, that still sounds like a lot to me, so like if you're throwing this in your main deck,
5 is, definitely a lot of life. I could also believe for sure not worth main decking because there just might be some decks that, do their thing and kill you without targeting your stuff.
Right.
But that buyout is really important, right? It's very Dismember-like or whatever
Totally.
from a black deck, I
Yeah.
guess, specifically, where like eventually you could play your giant thing with this up for 3 mana and like not have it get hit by removal.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Or
That's
resolve your
important.
spell through a counter spell, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly like Dismember, where it's like 3 mana, but it could cost less.
Yeah.
Number 3 for me is Aang, Swift Avatar.
Very nice.
So-
That's my rank 2 card for reference. So.
Okay, very nice. This, I mean, it looks amazing, right? And then I kept thinking about all the things about it that's not as good as it looks. Like, for instance, unlike Spellcaller, when you're airbending something, they could recast it for 2. So, and they can recast it; it's not stuck.
Yep.
And unlike Mana War, if you bounce a giant thing, they can recast it for 2. And maybe some of the time, you don't even want to bounce their creature because it's like a 4-mana creature with an ETB. That being said, you pass with 3 mana up, you're basically always going to find something good to do with this.
Yeah, it's kind of Reflector Magi, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah. Flash.
Yeah, Flash.
I mean-
Legendary is certainly kind of awkward for this, but I think it'll.
Yeah,
see a
you
lot
might
of
play
play.
less than 4 because of that.
Yep.
But it's just so flexible, and it does some things particularly well. So because it airbends just creatures, and the way airbend works is you have to cast the thing. First of all, you can kill tokens with it, so that's really good. And then if your opponent ever activates a man land and you snag it with this, that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, very
As
nice.
far as I know, they can't replay it.
You want to read it, by the way?
Yeah, my bad. Aang Swift Savior. 1 white blue, 2/3, flash flying. When Aang enters, airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. Airbend is I'll just read it again. It's exile it. While it's exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 generic rather than paying its mana cost. And then it has Waterbend 8, transform Aang.
I have it
And
right.
Aang
You got it?
perfect. You want to read it?
Yeah, so the transform side is Aang and Law, Ocean's Fury. It's colorless. It's a legendary creature, avatar, spirit ally. 5/5 reach trample. And when Aang and Law attack, put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control. So if you waterbended to tap things, you can get immediate value. And that's, you know, a giant monster, super threatening.
Totally. And the fact that so much of the value of the card is just on the front half makes this bonus pretty nice.
But also, you know, part of it, you know, it's a little bit, your opponent has to do something about it eventually.
Totally. Yeah,
And
5/5 trample reach, pretty big.
yeah. So some funny things. So the front side is also, it's an avatar ally, human avatar ally, and it just reminds me. So if there's an ally deck, I totally expect this to be, a big staple of it.
Sure.
So probably banned at a minimum for like the ally deck they're kind of trying to shove into the set. Which, by the way, I think that's super cool, the ally and lessons deck. And I mentioned they're kind of decks that don't look powerful enough, but like, I like that somebody could get into this set and draft it on an arena and build one of these decks, and I'm sure they could hit Mythic with them or things like that.
Yeah, totally. It's nice to have
A fully fledged out deck that doesn't look bad
in one set. Yeah, even if it's like tier 3,
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of people who like to build like flavorful decks or cheaper decks.
And also, I guess this Aang and any Aang in the set, which we might not get into, are avatars, which I only want to point out because you can't find them off Overlord of the Baelmerk, because it was designed to not find other avatars because that's the same creature set, which is very weird and coincidental. But for airbending, this can only airbend a creature, so it didn't really matter. But it is kind of funny that like if you impend Overlord of the Baelmerk and then airbend it with maybe a different card, you can then cast it for 2.
Yeah, there's maybe some world where you brew an Esper deck in Standard and you might want to put these 2 cards in your deck.
Yeah.
Maybe. That is funny. Yeah, the creature types, I mean, human is not as relevant as it used to be, but you can see a world where that becomes relevant again. But yeah, ally is definitely relevant. So, really strong card. That's your number 2. We can move on to my number 2, which is Badger Mole Cub.
I guess that's my number 1. We stole a lot. We went right before each other a lot in this episode.
We did. Badger Mole Cub's pretty broken, huh? 2 mana, so it's 1 and a green, 2/2. When this creature enters, you earthbend 1. So remember, that's you target your own land. It becomes a 0/0 creature, and you put, in this case, 1+1/+1 counter on it. And if that land dies or is exiled, it comes back to the battlefield tapped. And then this creature has, whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. So since this is your number 1 card, why do you like it so much?
So, I mean, even at its baseline, if you play this with like an untapped land, you can like play another 2-drop immediately, or more if you have more mana. But even if you play this on turn 2, it's ramping you. Your opponent can't really interact with... They can interact with this, and then that earthbended 1/1 land won't tap for additional mana. These stack in multiples, though. So that's kind of interesting.
It's not legendary, thank God.
I think it's not going to be weird if this card, if we're right and this card sees a lot of play for a 3-mana turn. Your opponent's going to play this, target their untapped land, and play another one, and target another land, and there's so much mana next turn.
Yeah, it's going to feel kind of nasty.
Yeah, it works with Llanowar Elves and Gene Pollinator, and there's just already this green, it's the green-blue Simic Stompy deck, but that deck doesn't have to be blue. It plays Jackal, which is awesome, I'll admit, and, things like Floodpits Drowner are like creatures that are interaction, which is nice, but, this core of like a Llanowar Elves aggro Ouroboros deck maybe, because this card also goes wide for Ouroboros. Once again, target a Restless Land, target a Soulstone Sanctuary, you might have a little bit more going on there than just Earthbend 1 looks like. Innkeeper's Talent also, wants just as many bodies as possible. So even though that 1/1 Earthbend 1 might not really get in any damage if you don't do anything to it, and it's just going to be a mana dork, there's a lot of opportunities just to split the bodies up, and it's just a resilient body because of the way Earthbend works, where I guess they could bounce it, the lands, but
yeah,
we're not going to tempo,
but
it's still not
a 2-for-1, yeah. And yeah, exactly like you're saying, because of how Earthbend works, there's a lot of insulation for this. So even if you're playing it in a deck which isn't filled to the brim with creatures, but you just want it as an efficient ramp creature, it's pretty good there too. It's pretty safe. I mean, they can kill your cub, right? And then you still have this 1/1 land that you're probably still just tapping for 1, but maybe it keeps some X1s back on your opponent's side or that sort of thing. So
yeah, and the cheap earthbending once again. So the Restless cards aren't designed. They don't have super powerful on attack effects, but Restless Vinestalk says when this attacks another target creature becomes a 3/3 until end of turn. That's an example of like that's about as strong as it gets, to be honest. So it's not amazing, but it's also not nothing and cheating on the mana, or just playing this on turn 2 on your Restless Vinestalk, and then on future turns that Vinestalk can maybe attack and grow something else.
Mm-hmm. The other ones, attack, create a map. I mean, that's not bad. Attack, create a food token.
Yep.
It's all pretty
I guess
decent.
the Restless Bivouac is another one because it can grow. It says when it attacks, target creature gets a +1/+1 counter, so it can target itself, actually.
Sure, yeah.
If the Vinestalk could target itself, I'd be way more thinking that's actually pretty strong.
Yeah. The green-white one.
Oh yeah,
your
the green
team.
white
I
one,
mean,
definitely too. Yeah, pump your team. That's amazing with this, right? Like that's
yeah, or in the sort of deck that it's going in too.
yeah.
Certainly. Yeah, this card's just an all-star. There's almost no way it doesn't see standard play, and it maybe sees play outside of that too, because it's so good with more powerful mana creatures in older formats as well. So totally makes sense.
Yeah, you
and
can
then
play
of course,
land or elves into this, into another one of this, and you can pick whether you tap the land or the land or elves. But yeah, just
yeah. So just going through the rest of my graphic to our number ones.
yep.
Pretty strong set overall, I will say.
Yeah, definitely seems pretty powerful. I liked all of our inclusions for the most part.
Yeah, I feel more confident about our top 10
Yeah.
this time. It does seem more clear which ones the good cards are, and certainly there's a few good cards that weren't on our lists, but
Yeah, I'd say,
Between the two of us,
like
we
my
covered a
number
lot.
6 was Wan Shi Tong, and that was like a clear cutoff to me. Where like those top 6 I felt like these felt
Yeah.
I felt pretty confident these were going to become kind of impactful. Maybe the boomerang basics doesn't work out, but mostly like I've been playing Amulet and looking for random green sideboard cards, and Gnarled Professor just actually being in the conversation now is kind of funny to me.
that is pretty funny. Yeah, and I think the only thing that I might have wrong is like maybe the Spirit Water Revival isn't very good, but
Yeah,
pretty happy with both our
no, I
lists,
agree.
to be honest.
it's cool you also had Airbending Ascension. That was one I thought I was really kind of stretching on, but it.
Oh, no, I think it's good, man. It's so little
Yeah, I mean
investment,
the
especially
Conjured
against other
Closet
creatures.
like effect payoff is just, I don't know. It's
Right.
not something that's really come up, but if you've played like a Blink deck in Cube, like or Soul Herder is a card I guess that people have played in Modern. That
Yeah,
effect just closes out a game when it works.
yeah.
So the
It's
reward's
just-
really there.
Totally, yeah. And it's always bringing value. Cool. Alrighty, well, that is our top 10 for Avatar. Let us know what you think. Let us know in the comments if we got one horribly wrong or if we missed a card. I wouldn't be surprised if we missed a card that ends up being really good. So if you know what card we missed, let us know down below. And thanks everyone for watching. You can find us over on patreon.com/StockUpPodcast, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, really. Until next time. So I figured in our sign off we could talk about Spider-Man a little bit.
Oh, of course. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear what you're going to say, but my overall take was that like it's not our fault that we didn't pick any cards on it that are good in standard, because like none of the cards were good, so we're just kind of comparing them to each other, right? It's possible after these bans that some of them will see play,
Yep.
but like, is there
Yeah.
anything that you're
Oh, so I'm looking at
forward
my
to?
list. I had Arachne, Psionic Weaver, Heroes Hangout. I've seen those both in play or cast. Scarlet Spider, Eddie Brock, Spider Punk, Spectacular Spider-Man, Spider-Ham, Soulstone, Miles Morales' School Days. None of those. Admittedly, Multiversal Passage was probably the best one. I guess Superior Spider-Man, though, that's a deck.
Okay, yeah, I didn't have that either. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
That's a deck I'm kind of excited for in New Standard. And also kind of a weird story. I guess it's a sign-off anyways. And I might be wrong. I might have seen things wrong. But so the deck in Standard uses Superior Spider-Man with Bringer of the Last Gift from LCI, which is like a Living Ends demon, where when it enters, you like exile all the creatures from graveyard, get rid of all the other creatures in play, and then return all the exiled graveyard things to the battlefield. So besides itself, it switches the graveyard and battlefield. And Superior Spider, it says you have to cast it specifically. But Spider-Man, being a body double, enters as a copy of a creature in your graveyard. So you still cast it.
Right.
So you get around that. Your 8-drop now works for 4 mana. And then it says, when you do, exile it. When you copy something is what Superior Spider-Man says. So it's actually a delayed trigger, which means when you
okay.
pick Bringer of the Last Gift with it, you get to stack your 2 triggers of reanimating the graveyard and exiling the thing you picked. So you actually end up reanimating the Bringer before it gets exiled. So you get a 6/6 flying. You get your whole graveyard, including the 6/6 flying, and it's not going to trigger again.
Gotcha.
But it's kind of weird because I'm pretty sure I watched Spotlight Series Orlando and was kind of tuning into this deck because they were featuring a lot of non-BV decks, of course, and there was a player making kind of a deep run in the tournament with it. And I swear I watched them do this multiple times and never put the 6/6 in the. And then the next weekend, I watched the Spotlight Series in Liverpool, and the player played it, and they put the 6/6 demon into play, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, no one's noticing this. And I overhear Arne Huschenbeth, great pro Magic player, was doing coverage, say, and of course, like, you can stack the triggers to bring back the 6/6, and I look up the cards and I'm like, oh my god, like, it's just, it's kind of silly, but
that's funny.
That card's already Wrath of Godding when you play it. Right. So sometimes you have incentive to play it with maybe the demon as the only creature in your graveyard. So a 6/6 flying is obviously a huge. I mean, it's I guess obviously a 6/6 flying is a huge deal, but it's not like you always reanimate 20 power and that's your 26 power.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And certainly, man, if that deck was doing well, even with a field full of Cauldron.
Yeah, I played Awaken the Honored Dead main, 4 copies, which can answer Cauldron, so that helped. Sure. Also, it's the Spider-Man card doesn't actually target. So if you have 2 giant monsters in your graveyard and you cast it, you're going to get one of them. Okay,
so just pinpoint exile one card isn't the best.
Yeah.
Out of the graveyard.
Yeah, they made a point about that people don't really play graveyard decks and nobody plays Graveyard Hate because there's a main deck Cauldron deck. But this is kind of a critical mass graveyard deck where exile 1 card a turn and I'm trying to exile my own things is kind of slow.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe we did mess this one up too. We didn't have that or the Passage. The Passage to me was I definitely thought about it and I knew it'd be a fine card, but I was like, gosh, more shotguns are going to come out and then people are really going to play it, which might still happen.
Yeah, it's just kind of, I guess currently the blue-red deck doesn't have steam vents, so there's not a lot of other color combos, but I think I'll do a quick look. Does the Dimir deck play it?
I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to Standard since Spider-Man came out, I'll be honest with you.
I guess they're playing Starting Town. That I don't know. With the Verges involved, I kind of think you're just supposed to play 4 Watery Grave and 4
seems better than Starting Town and 2 color deck. Yeah. But certainly once you get to 3, maybe.
Yeah, of course you actually need it. But the picking a color is pretty close to always what you need in 2 color decks.
Let's see. Looking at my list, I had Jackal on there. Jackal's decent. I have the Soulstone. I still think the Soulstone might see play.
Yeah, me too. It's tough too because we just haven't had a window for these cards to have impacted Standard at all.
Yeah. I also still think Sandman's good, but maybe I'm crazy. It wasn't even on your list, right?
It was my 11th. I'm looking at it now. So.
Okay. Maybe.
Yeah.